I would like to invite Lepale Ozzy Simano, who is the Assistant Resident Representative of the UNDP Environment and Climate Change Unit, to share with us a presentation on Stockholm Plus 50 and how our voices are important to amplify our message on resolving climate, nature, and pollution challenges. Loa Fionga Lepale.
Thank you, moderator, distinguished guests, faculty members and students of the National University of Samoa, faculty members and students of the University of the South Pacific, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure on behalf of the UNDP resident representative to welcome you all to the Stockholm Plus 50 National Consultations webinar with universities and youth. Talofa lava and welcome. The Stockholm Plus 50 will commemorate the 50 years since the convening of the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment and celebrate 50 years of global environmental action by recognizing the importance of multilateralism in tackling the Earth's triple planetary crisis: climate, nature, and pollution. The national consultations will be an occasion to raise awareness about the importance of protecting our planet. It is an opportunity for members of the community, businesses, organizations, academic institutions, youth, women, development partners, and government to dialogue on issues relevant to overcome the triple planetary crisis of climate change, of nature and biodiversity loss, and of pollution and waste. The outcomes of these national dialogues will contribute to the international meeting to be held in June this year at Stockholm, Sweden, entitled Stockholm Plus 50, a healthy planet for the prosperity of all. Our responsibility, our opportunity, which will be held during the week of World Environment Day. The Stockholm Plus 50 also aims to help accelerate the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals during the decade of action, including through sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. We trust the consultation will spark interesting dialogues and see how we can best address critical environment issues here in Samoa, and hopefully to inspire a younger generation to take these resolutions further into a better future. With that, I would like to thank our panelists for this morning for taking time away from your busy schedule to partake in this dialogue. We thank you for your commitment to seeking solutions and better ways to address what was lacking in the past 50 years since the UN Conference on the Environment, particularly in your line of work. I wish the best for the dialogue today, and I encourage everyone who is joining online to partake in this consultation, whether it's during the dialogue or through the State of the Planet Global Survey, which will be shared by our moderator and colleagues. Wish you all the best. So if you
Whaftaitele lava I loa Fionga Lepale. Talofa lava and welcome to today's Stockholm Plus 50 National Consultation webinar series. I am Dr. Pitaomi Tapungiliho of the School for International Training based at in US, and it is my pleasure and absolute honor to moderate today's session with academic institutions, and it will be me for the next 2 hours, I'm sorry. And it's wonderful to be a part of this conversation. I take this opportunity to thank our panelists and all our participants for making time, for availing yourselves to be here today. These are crucial conversations around the importance of protecting our planet and complementing the important spaces that have been created for discussing and resolving climate, nature, and pollution challenges. Before we go any further, I'd just like to share a few housekeeping rules. All participants, please, you're requested to type in your questions in the Q&A chat box. If you have questions for a particular speaker, please mention the name along with your question. All questions from participants will be answered during the Q&A session toward the last part of the webinar. At around 11:10 a.m., we will share a global survey for the participants. We would like to get your views on the state of the planet, and we really encourage you to participate in it because it's really crucial to hear your voice. This webinar today also has a sign language interpreter, requesting please that all speakers speak loudly, clearly, and slowly for our interpreter to be able to interpret as best as possible. Allow me now to introduce our guest speakers. Ngana mana whainu latu, lovely to see you, is currently the head of science department at our National University of Samoa, Le Papa i Ngala. He was educated in Japan, where he acquired a Master of Science degree in eco-environmental and civil engineering. He also has a bachelor's degree from Flinders in South Australia and has more than 15 years of teaching and lecturing at university level. Currently, he is the coordinator for the Asia Pacific Initiative for Climate Change, Food Security, and Renewable Energy. He is also a visiting scholar to the Södertörn University for Coastal Management Research in Stockholm in Sweden. Our next speaker, our other panelist, I'm sorry, is To'oleava Dr. Fanafi Aiono Letangaloa. She is the campus director for the University of the South Pacific Samoa campus at Alafua. She acquired her PhD from Otago and was also an honors graduate. She has experience as a law lecturer from Waikato University, and she was also the CEO of the Samoa International Finance Authority. But most importantly, she is the daughter of former parliamentarian Awhionga Letangaloa Pita and Aiono Dr. Fanafi Letangaloa. It is an honor to have you with us today, Dr. Fanafi. And now to our youngest panelist, Ms. Okalani Mariner, who was born and raised in Samoa, a climate activist and also climate warrior, artist and storyteller, formidable young woman who at the tender age of 17 was the vice president and co-founder of the first ever environmental student body at the National University of Samoa, Lanu Lauava Student Association in 2021. It's a youth-led organization that aims to raise awareness about the effect and impact of climate change on SIDS nations, as well as to provide a platform empowering youth to raise their voices on one of the most important issues in our day and age. It is absolutely wonderful to be with the three of you today. And without further ado, we'll now move on to the subject at hand. And reflecting on the urgent need for actions to achieve a healthy planet and prosperity for all, I pose this question to Ngalumalemana and ask if you could please reflect on what actions that you see would be needed to upscale the changes toward a healthy planet from the perspective of academia or a university academic institution. If you could also then share about policies or structures that need to be in place in order for such action to take place.
The audio okay? Okay. Well, from the academic side, we try to educate our students, and we reflect on how we can be more sustainable. What are sustainable ways that we should look forward to? We look at renewable energies. These are the ways we should be looking at. What we are doing right now is unsustainable. We are not going to be able to continue this sort of lifestyle for for much longer. We need to look at sustainable ways, sustainable energies, and changing our lifestyles. We are just we are not living towards a future. We are just not using up here. So what I'm trying to say is that what we do at university is try to let students know, explore, try to explore options. Let's explore options, how we can be more sustainable, how we can make sure that life goes on in the next 50, 100 years on Earth. What I see is, as I said before, the unsustainable way of living in Samoa and around the world, not just Samoa, but around the world. We need to change. We need to change. Otherwise, we are just going down a very deep slope. So the urgent need for actions, education. Education is another way to try and solve the problems. Now, the problem, there we have many problems, but education is needed. Education is the key. We educate our young generations to be more mindful of our environment. As Okalani has been overseas and done a lot of work with that, we can definitely say that education is a key to solve many of our problems. And a healthy planet. How are we going to manage a healthy planet? Well, it takes well, not just one country or one nation. It takes everybody to work towards a healthy nation, healthy Earth. What we see right now is around the world, it's not. We see deforestation in Brazil, everywhere there's war in Africa, whatever's going on there. It's just not healthy. But what can we do as a small nation? We can contribute whatever small amount we can contribute to maintain the health of our planet. Yeah, I'm pretty sure everybody else will put in and contribute. Yep. So as a role as from the university, this is our role from the National University of Samoa, is to not only teach, but to also explore and demonstrate. There's no use of teaching if you cannot demonstrate and explore ways to achieve our goals. I've been teaching for 25 years and I've seen a lot of students go through. And I think that the way forward for Samoa is education. During this time of the pandemic, we are limited. The students are not on campus, but we try to reach out to them through online courses. But we try our best. Thank you. Otherwise, any other questions from Mulmul?
Saingan Malamona, would any of the other panelists like to contribute? Dr. Fanafi?
Talo falava, everybody. Nalo soifua. Thank you, moderator, for the opportunity. I guess from the University of the South Pacific's perspective, I think there is a huge indication in the fact that quality education is mentioned specifically as a sustainable development goal. And so I think the consultation today that is canvassing the opinions and the positions, not only of the tertiary institutions, but also the students that are studying there, is timely and appropriate and apt. I think it is a well-known cliche that we look at the young people as the future. And it seems, and it has been proven time and time again, that the best way in which to reach our future is to build it by building the specific minds that we hope will bring about the influence and the changes that need to be seen in our world. 50 years is a long time, and it's a severe indictment against all of us that we have this decade of change before we hit 2030, which has been the target year by which all things should be coming, together. And yet we look around us and things are anything but coming together. So the policies that the universities and different educational institutions need to look at is, what are we teaching our young people? And I think maybe by the time we reach university, it is a bit late. It is a type of change in education and conditioning and awareness that needs to start right from the home and in through primary school, right up to secondary school, before they hit university, when they actually can implement the things that they have seen and learned through further research, especially scientifically, in ways to identify how we can sustainably activate the things that need to happen, because we're still talking about the need for change, but we are seeing very little change. One of the things that the University of the South Pacific has tried to do is enter different rankings. Not that rankings are things to be guided by, but it is a way to measure. And there are the Times Higher Education rankings, and it's the impact rankings that I'm talking about, as opposed to their global rankings, because those ones measure the performance of any institution against the sustainable development goals that we are trying to achieve. And this year they were able to submit on 6 different sustainable development goals. And a lot of them that we submitted on and actually got well ranked in are to do with the environment, like Sustainable Goal 13 on climate action, affordable and clean energy that was mentioned by Ngalu Malmana with the renewable energy SDG 7, life below water, SDG 14, which is crucial for any island nation, just like Samoa and just the SIDS across the planet. And the other one that we submitted for was quality education, because whatever it is that we talk about, we need to be able to implement that. And the only way we can implement that is by changing the curricula right from the beginning of the education system, and even more so when we get to the tertiary level, especially around the area of research. I've taken up a bit too much time, but the agricultural discipline is based here in Samoa. And I think that the working together of sustainable food sources, not only from the land, but also from the sea with regard to marine resources, are 2 areas that would bring the planet, I guess, together, and our efforts to work towards a safer planet for everybody, which, although it feels like it's too late, it's never too late to make a change, however small. Tailava.
Dr. Fanafi, thank you. And congratulations on the impact ranking. That's amazing work. Now over to Okalani. Darling, this is your turn.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo what Dr. Fanaavi mentioned about starting at secondary and primary levels when it comes to change. I truly believe, as someone who has just come out of the education system in Samoa, one thing I realized we were very ill prepared for was the future and was integrating into universities overseas, and not just overseas, but regionally. And what I mean by that is digital transformation. One thing that is often really just grazed over in our education system is the lack thereof of digital education. Not just educating children on how to use tech, how to respond to emails, how to use Google Suite, just to submit assignments or use research papers to do work. This was all introduced to us at university, but this isn't something that should have been introduced to us at university. This is just something that should definitely have been introduced in our computer studies classes. And I truly don't, I don't blame the teachers entirely for this. I think it is due to the curriculum as it was. And something I've realized is, the same experience my parents had when they came out of university and went to uni is the same experience I'm experiencing, and my peers are experiencing. They told me, we were always like straight in the books. When we needed to do a research paper, we had to go to the library and we had to do referencing by hand. And when we got to Australia, we had no idea how to use a computer. And, it's sad, but it's the same case now. We have kids who were grade A students in Samoa who did so amazingly well in college. And then they get to university and they're stunted because they don't know how to use technology. And they find that they're going to be struggling even more when they go to university. So they get their scholarship. And then what? There's no smooth transition from secondary to uni. It's just throwing them straight in the deep end. And I think that if we really want to prepare our students and our youth for the future, digital transformation needs to be something that is integrated within our curriculum and is encouraged more within high schools and primaries, especially because I was actually part of the beta testing for Moodle. So, in 2020, my year was the one that we were just thrown in on the deep end. We're like, yep, we're going to just do online schooling. Everybody's going to be on Moodle. We're not going to teach you. We're all kind of learning on the fly. So I think in that essence, I personally experienced the struggle of learning online for the first time. And I know so many students who performed so well in person struggled as well because they didn't know how to use Moodle or how to study from home. And, we all come from Samoan families. So there's also the aspect of, having to do all the fe'aus and having no data reception and then having to, balance telling your parents, the boundary between I'm studying and I'm at home. So you can do chores for me because I see that you're on your bed and you're not doing anything. So that was like something I experienced personally. And, I truly want to see more digital transformation within schools. And it is great to see USB kind of build on that because they are regional. So they do have a couple of online classes, and the students that I have spoken to are fairly familiar with online Zoom classes because they have to Zoom into their teachers overseas. But I think when it comes to learning aspects, that's where we're really struggling right now as youth. And I think that's something that we would like to see more of in the future is just more education on the digital side and providing opportunities, universities providing opportunities for students to learn how to use these tools and to learn how to utilize their smart devices in order to study better from wherever they are. I think that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Okalani. What a wonderful intergenerational conversation we're having. But just to change it up a bit, I'd like to speak about how COVID-19 has actually erased a lot of progress made towards the achieving of sustainable development goals. But it's also given us some type of a reset button. And so maybe, Okalani, if you could talk more about what actions could be taken to achieve a sustainable and inclusive recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And more specifically, if you could, given your talk about the need for an increase in digital use, maybe if you could talk about what skills are needed and what is needed from universities in order for young people to acquire skills for decent green jobs of the future. Maybe if you could share a bit more about that.
Sure. I think in order to understand what needs to be changed in the universities, and also like what jobs may be available, we first have to look at what we're doing now. And in terms of a sustainable recovery, I am quite optimistic, if I could say, about our situation because of the parallels between COVID-19 and the climate crisis. And what I mean by that is, time and time again, we have, a lot of amazing scientists and a lot of activists have really vocalized the importance of changing the discussion now for climate change. And a lot of people have said, you really need to do all of these things in order for this to happen and in order for us to reverse climate change. But a lot of it has not been seen. But when COVID-19 hit, overnight, people had to change their policies. Overnight, people had to change their habits and their behaviors because of the pandemic. And, you had corporate people who had policies that had to be integrated overnight, had to prepare their employees for work from home. You had universities who had to onboard all of their students onto Moodle, like with the switch. And, we weren't prepared for it, but we had to make that change. And in that same manner, if we could just implement that with respect to climate change, so much could be done. If we, just really diverted a lot of our financing into the climate crisis, this wouldn't really be a conversation. It's so easy to change, but behaviors have been shown time and time again, we are creatures of habit. And so even if we want to do things, it really has to be a matter of will. And I think if we were to look at just how to start a just recovery, there are 5 policies. I always say, and 350 Pacific always says as well, which is in order to have, uphold a sustainable recovery at every level, there are 5 principles that always have to be integrated. 1, to put people's health first, no exceptions. 2, provide economic relief directly to the people. 3, help our workers and communities, not corporate executives. 4, create resilience for future crises. And 5, build solidarity and community across borders and do not empower authoritarians. In order for us to really reach true change, that must be the change that we have to perform. And, when I look at it, just putting people's health first, the group of people that have really been affected by this is our health workers. With the COVID situation, they've been our frontliners, and their health and safety is just as important as our people. And in order to ensure that all of us are moving forward in a sustainable way, we also have to keep their health and safety in mind as well. And not just that, but our first response workers. There's government, there's our SWA, EPC, and so many other government corporations that are working to make sure that our COVID-19 lockdown runs smoothly. And so in order to ensure that we're all moving forward, we also have to keep their safety in mind. And I think if we look at universities in this sense, and just education in this sense, it really will have to be, for Samoa specifically, just educating people on how to use digital technology to learn. And I spoke about this briefly last year when I was at the NUS strategy Talanoa we had, where I was really honored to be invited by the Vice Chancellor. But I told him that in order for Moodle to work, there would have to be digital hubs within villages. It's one thing to tell students that, we'll give you a free data plan and, Moodle will work and you can get all of your assignments on this, but it's another to just have support because of where we are at with education in terms of the digital aspect in Samoa. There needs to be a hub within villages or within certain spaces within Samoa that children or youth can go to in order to learn for a brief period of time, just so they could separate home from study. And not just home from study, but have a support system or have a TV or a laptop at their disposal that they can use for a brief period of time or within that day. And I think this is really important when we look at it in terms of sustainability, because this doesn't have to be a long time thing, but you have to teach youth and you have to teach teachers as well how to help their students. Because what happened was, the students were struggling and they'd go to their teachers, but the teachers are like, I don't even know how to use Moodle either. So, we're all learning here. and so I felt bad because I was in a very privileged position where I was tech savvy. So I understood how to use it and I would be helping my peers. But I couldn't be everywhere, and neither could everybody else who is tech savvy help everyone else. And this had to be something that was integrated. And so I think for me, when we talk about tools, it's really just basic learning, how to set up a Zoom account, how to join a Zoom, how to press mute on a screen, and what is lecture etiquette. Do I turn on my mute button so I can hear my entire extended family while you're talking? What are the things that need to be done in order for us to move forward? It's just basic tech skills. And I believe that's something that's really important in helping students really perform to the best of their abilities. One thing I always believe is there's no student that is dumb. Sorry. It's always other people had an advantage. And if everybody was provided the same advantage or the same accommodations, every student would excel in their school or in their learning. So I think in the season that we're in for COVID-19, there has to be a way for universities to really help out their students on a very basic level in terms of tech. And unfortunately, we are seeing a decline in enrollment because of COVID-19 and lockdown. A lot of students are reluctant to come back to school if it means that they're doing everything online, but we have to give them some incentive. I think a lot of the reasons they don't want to come is because it's a whole nother thing they have to learn on top of learning school, is learning how to study online. And I hope I made sense, but I think that's just how I think we should move forward in terms of digital transformation for universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Okalani. And thank you for sharing about the importance of tech savviness. But I'd like to ask Dr. Fanafi, please, just to push on with regarding to this topic of just recovery. Contextually, how can all Samoan communities benefit from opportunities that an institution such as yours could put in place in order for sustainable and just transitions to take place? Morning.
Thank you very much. It's very refreshing to hear Okalani, because it sort of reminds us of where we were. When you said intergenerational, I was like, wow, that's the first time anybody's ever referred to me as part of an intergenerational conversation. I feel truly old, but it shows how this is not sort of one of those things that where we focus on only one aspect of it. It's like every aspect of a community, every aspect of the machinery have to move together. So we can't just focus on the youth. We have to focus on the youth and the other generations. We have to focus on universities and primary school and secondary school. And the issue you mentioned about how is it that we actually move as a community so that everybody benefits. I think another thing that Okalani mentioned I'll sort of springboard from that is having these units in different places that can be centers or hubs for the technology. Before we went into the first lockdown, I understand that there was a congregation in Levi, Samoa. I think it's the Efakasa congregation. And they put together like a computer lab for their young people. And I don't think there were many PCs in this, but it was a position and a place for them to come to so that they could all do their online learning together. Now, this is something that is possible in Samoa because the traditional social structure is already in place. And around things like health, the pushing of the vaccination, as soon as it started going out to these structures, then it started to roll. But when you were calling them to come into the urban areas, they weren't really coming in, or they were coming in and overcrowding and just becoming spreader events. But once you sort of decentralize again and use the already existing structures, then you're able to bring it about again. Before COVID, there were a whole lot of homework centers happening around different pastors' houses because we already had the pastor school and the Sunday school that was already utilizing that space. And so it's not like a huge jump to then just start adding all these different things. And because there's finances in churches, and churches always put their children first, whenever we talk about children, it's like, you know, okay, that's why White Sunday is the most popular holiday and businesses make the most on White Sunday, is because we have no qualms spending on our children. We'll think twice about spending on our spouse, but our children, that is no question about that one. And so, you know, if we use the existing structures, that will allow us to push the message out, and then we can all sort of still sing off the same music sheet rather than everybody trying to push their own car uphill. One of the things that I found, because I'm not a USP alumni, I noticed that they have 2 courses which are compulsory if you start a degree. And one is to do with English, so referencing all those things. And the other one is to do with computers, everything around Moodle, all the different programs, even how to use Excel spreadsheets. And they don't seem important to us, but at some point in life, you'll end up needing to use one of these things. And it's a great leveler. So everybody, regardless of how you were at secondary school or primary school, you all take this, and then you can proceed through your university education on a level playing field as far as those 2 courses are concerned. And I think that's another way in which you can start making it more just and accessible. I think access is a key word. Access to services, access to support, and access to internet. Now, internet here in Samoa is extremely expensive compared to other places in the Pacific. As a regional university, they always say, you've got the Samoa cable, how come it's so expensive to have internet in Samoa, whereas it's much cheaper in Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, and Tonga? So that's where I say that's where the government comes in, because the cable is a partnership between public and private. Now, there needs to be something that happens there. And the whole COVID recovery, the main hindrance to it is economics. Because when everybody had to stop flying, you know, the environment cleared up. Even over Beijing, the smog cleared up. But they couldn't keep that for long because the capitalist machinery needs everything to be pumping again. And so we're back to the manufacturers, we're back to the flying, we're back to the oil guzzling practices. And once again, the environment starts moving into the background because we've got a vaccination for COVID and the most current variant.
Thank you, Dr. Fanafi. Ngalumalimana, please go ahead. Ngalumalimana, you're mute.
Okay, I'm good. Okay, I wanted to say something about what Okalani was talking about. The new generation. Yeah, I feel bad because um, I just I suppose got to use Moodle a few years ago anyway. But just saying that the impact of e-learning on our students, because I teach a 200 level paper, a 300 level paper, but also a postgraduate diploma paper. But okay, we can all put it on Moodle. Yes, of course. I contact them through email, but we need to do practicals. That's a problem. We need to do hands-on. Hands-on, I take my students out into the field. We go diving, we climb a mountain, we go, in these environmental science courses, we need to do hands-on work, but we are missing all that. Wow, you can go on Moodle, get your notes, do your assignments, whatever, but we're really missing this very important component of their studies, and they really need it. Just like Okalani was saying, that when you go overseas, you're ill prepared. You need to be well prepared when you leave here. If you're going to New Zealand, Australia, you have to be really prepared for what's gonna hit you. So this pandemic has many impacts. A lot of my students, they say they can't access our notes because they don't have credit, they don't have data. I don't blame them. They don't have the connection. I don't blame them. So I think the government should look at, we've opened up this week, but only for those that really need to be on campus. But I really feel sorry for the rest of the students that we have. I really need face-to-face contact with staff, academic staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, there is much to be worked on. However, I would like to push on regarding your thoughts on marginalized and vulnerable communities. As we know, at the university, only a certain type of person acquires this type of education. But I was wondering if you could give some thought to how universities and policies stemming from such institutions could maybe benefit marginalized and vulnerable groups, so that indeed everyone does benefit from a planet that is healthy and prosperous for each and every human. Thank you.
Okay, so we're we're talking about vulnerable groups and marginalized groups. Well, as an academic, we look at where we come from. I come from Hawaii, and I look at groups that are maybe they are able to be in universities, but they are not able to because of certain circumstances, financial or otherwise. But I see a lot of opportunities for those who are in the villages. I did a study in Samoa last year. This is about we actually did a replanting of mangroves there because during the rainy season, the the seashore and all the lowland areas are all inundated by water. So we did a replanting exercise there. So what happened was, it wasn't until we did this meeting with the Matais. Well, this is really funny. You know, in Samoa, you have the Matais, and they want to be the first group. And then you have the women's group and the entitled men's group, right? So, but what we really wanted was to meet with the people that really mattered for our project. But the Matais wanted to be the first. They wanted to be, you know, being Matais that they will run. They couldn't. It was the women that did the work. It was the untitled men that did the work. It was the little kids that did the work. We went and I saw the potential in these communities. What I'm saying is the potential that they could be much more than what they have. So I just think that, you know, in our society, we have a lot of potential out there. We're just not reaching out to them.
Maybe Dr. Fanafi, if you would like to share from the perspective of a regional institution that provides tertiary education. Oh, and I believe she's now gone offline.
Sorry, my
Oh no, she's on. She's on.
sorry, my internet dropped. You know, just to be an example for everybody of how unreliable our internet is. So I didn't catch your question. Would you mind repeating it, please?
So, Dr. Fanafi, I was just saying that it would be wonderful to hear from your perspective as a regional organization that provides tertiary education, and maybe some of the policies that are in place to ensure that truly everyone can benefit, marginalized and vulnerable groups, from structures that you might put in place to ensure prosperity for all.
Well, one of the main benefits of the University of the South Pacific is that is in effect a regional university, and therefore the reach is greater. And then in specific island nations, where it's difficult to have just one center that everybody can get to, they have campuses, main campuses, and then centers that are outlying or satellites in the different islands. And so that's something, or provinces, depending on the size of the island group. For example, Vanuatu, they have a lot of centers in the outer islands. The same thing is the case even for Cook Islands, which is small, but they've got islands that are spread out. And that's the same also for Samoa. So although we have Samoa campus here on Upolu, we have Savaii Center in Salilolonga, Savaii, so that the access is there. Now, mentioned right throughout and alluded to is the finances. That's the main hurdle, because as soon as the services started being user pays, then that's when the whole money side of things came in. For example, long time ago in New Zealand, there was this push for free education from womb to tomb. And then Samoa followed that as well. And then because again, the issue of economics came in, we started charging. And then we recently had some free education at primary and secondary because of the aid of New Zealand and Australia, but it was only free with regard to fees, but all the other charges started coming in other ways. So bursary schemes and scholarship schemes are really important. But the problem with scholarship schemes is that it's driven by what the donor, by what the sponsor wants. And the means testing, the measure is a very tricky aspect because you can't measure everybody in the same way. However, there's still some efforts, for example, at the University of the South Pacific to provide bursary for families. So they don't do for households with an income that is below 25,000 Fijian a year. And then you can apply for bursary assistance. And that's a huge help, not only for foundation preliminary, but also for degree students. I think if we can figure out a way to redirect the finances, like was first indicated by Okalani, to the areas that need the most action, that will be the answer. But trying to get the political will, the fiscal policy, and the capitalist system to agree to something like that, well, that's where the rubber meets the road. And there was a conference last year where the Brazilian, I think, was it Brazilian? There was a prime minister, very, very eloquent lady who spoke, and it was all about these type, not Brazilian, can't remember which Caribbean island that was, the lady was the prime minister from, but it was this, it's putting your money where your mouth is. It's being able to, for example, incentivize recycling. If we were able to incentivize recycling, that would give money in the hands of people, because the people that would usually go and take, for example, when we used to get good money for glass bottles, and when the bottles were still glass, so many people would go and take the bottles and get some cash for the utilities and for the school fees. We have small loan systems and schemes, but they're not very sustainable. We have the seasonal worker scheme, but again, that's not sustainable, because we're taking out the people at their prime from our country, and they are using up their prime years picking fruit. We need to have a big overhaul in where we put the priorities of the spending. And it needs to be education, because it's not a quick fix. It's a fix that has to happen right from the start, right through to university education, because an educated nation is a wealthy nation, and a healthy nation is a rich nation. So, this is why every budget, there's a huge spending on education and health, because those are key. As soon as your human resource is not only mentally strong, but physically strong, then you're able to do as many things as you idealistically hope to do and plan for your country and your planet.
Thank you, Dr. Fanafi. Okalani, as a young person with so many years to contribute to this nation, how do you have any thoughts about how, from a perspective of a young person, how we could better provide for vulnerable and marginalized young people?
I think I just echo what Dr. Fanafi mentioned about just providing more sustainable policies in regards to education, and having those systems in place so that, we are building and training them from a very young age, and not just when they get to university. One thing I have experienced, not just, I am slowly learning over time, is that it's not, if a student struggles in school, it is not necessarily the teachers and school's fault. It's the curriculum and the education system in itself, because it set them up for failure. And that is something I have personally realized. The way, unfortunately, our school system is run is it's driven by competition. And that is because of the lack of scholarships within our university and the lack of opportunities available and accessible to students. In my personal high school years, I was always in competition with my students, with the mindset that there was only one engineering scholarship for New Zealand in my mind. And there was only perhaps a handful for Australia. And having that in mind in regards to competing with 200 students, let alone 2,000 students competing for the same pool of scholarships, my entire high school years were driven by competition and never by learning. And what I learned when I came to university was there were a lot of things I was stunted in terms of, wow, I'm ill prepared for university in itself, because university is not competition. It's really, everybody is trying to pass. Nobody really cares how well you're doing. If they care how well you're doing, good for you. But everybody's out here just trying to get a grade, C's get degrees. That was always what I was told. And I was only told that in university, but, I was never like, why didn't you tell me this in high school when I was a straight A student? And now I'm struggling to even pass in university. So I think in terms of, really helping marginalized communities in this season and in this transition, it is really providing education in its most basic form and providing support that is accessible. And I stress accessible because it's one thing to provide education, but it's another to ensure that students are actually making the most of it, or utilizing it, and actually have it available for them or at their disposal. So I think I just echo again what my amazing panelists were mentioning about really boosting education system, but also, having that money being used for what it should be. It's paying teachers a salary that's worth living, so people aren't moving overseas because they aren't making enough as a teacher or in their jobs. It's having curriculums that are actually easy to understand or are tailored to students in Samoa within our communities to their experience, so that it's not something that's just a copy and paste from Western society. Because a lot of things that you learn is there are a lot of principles that are trying to be integrated within Samoa, but it's not to our context. So it's also contextualizing education to our students, to our youth, and to our people. But that's my only add on to everything they've been mentioning.
No, thank you very, very much. And thank you all three of you for your wonderful contributions to today's conversation. At this juncture, we will now take a small break. I would like to encourage all participants, please, to participate in the global public survey. All answers are anonymous, and the survey takes only about 5 minutes to complete, but it's absolutely crucial that we hear from you. The results will be taken to Stockholm +50, the international meeting to be held in Sweden from the 2nd to the 3rd of June this year. And I'd like to thank you in advance for completing the global survey. We'll now take a 10-minute break and resume after a short while. Whakataite le lava. Welcome back, everybody. I trust you all had a nice little break. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge the contributions of Noe Maivanga from Nua Nua o Le Alofa. She's been helping us today with sign language interpretation and ensuring that this consultation is truly inclusive and accessible. Whakataite le lava. Before we move into the third part of the dialogue, I'd like to backtrack a little, if you don't mind, and ask, we've spoken at length about the role that digital technology could play in our moving forward, and the importance of tech savviness. I'd like to ask if you could please share more about what emerging fields exist in terms of in academia that could or would facilitate pathways toward decent green jobs in the future, alternatives to what we currently do. So maybe if we could hear about what exists in agriculture, and then we progress forward from there. Whakataite le lava.
Shall I start? I think one of the main things that was mentioned right from the start with Ngamalamana's talk is about renewable energy, because we need the energy source to power the technologies. And I think as soon as we sort the renewable energy side, that will alleviate a whole lot of pressure that is on the environment. And it will also alleviate the pressures and the shocks economically that are caused by the different disruptions that we are experiencing, not only with COVID, with transportation routes and all those things, and not only by plane, but also by ship and cargo, but also the disruption and being used as an implement or a weapon in the wars that are happening around the world. Because, for example, the oil issue is front and center with the Russian war on Ukraine and all those things. And so I think if we tackle the renewable energy side of things, that will not only alleviate the pressures in all those different areas, but it will actually be able to identify what we can work on with regards to technology. Because just as tech savviness is important, the technology may not necessarily be up to date to actually cover all the things that we need for it to cover now. For example, a few years ago, nobody really heard of Zoom. It's kind of like the vaccines, you know, they actually they were more responsive and reactive rather than things that were being built with this aim in mind. But they did happen. The same thing with regard to sustainable agriculture. We need to know what resources are at our disposal, and then we build around it practices that will be able to sustain. A few 20 years ago, probably not 20 years ago, sorry, goodness, 50 years ago, there were certain things that were being used in cropping that people didn't even bat an eyelid about. You know, no one were even worried about it. And now with the move towards organic, we're starting to see it not only as poisons for the soil, poisons for the waterways with the knowledge of things washing off the soil into the waterways, but it's also a main suicide tool. So there's so many social things, but the knowledge has been acquired over time. And so things need to change. And again, I go back to how we are on the back foot. And if we had started a bit earlier, we would have been, of course, further down the path at this point in time. But hindsight, as they say, is always 20/20 in its vision. And so coming back again, I think if we can get those key pillars in place around renewable energy, then the things that we will be able to do from that point on to power the types of jobs. Because, for example, working from home, now that's just totally changed the whole landscape of things. Currently in Parliament, we've got a bill for the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Labour. And they're starting to look at those things. You know, how do you ensure that a person is working so that they can sign in when the sign-in book is no longer in existence and the clicking card system isn't there? You can't go click it because you're at home. And then the boundary between work and home, you know, are you playing, you know, are you not being at work when you step out to put your laundry in or take it out? You know, is that okay under labor laws and under labor rights? And the domestic and the public life division is becoming more and more blurred. But coming back again to the issue we're talking about with the environment, I think the key is to work on the renewable energy side. And then from there, a lot of the other things will fall into place and come quickly or fall out of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Fanafi. Maybe if I could ask Okalani if there was anything she'd like to share from a youth perspective regarding a greener pathway for young climate activists such as yourself.
Thank you. Just before I do that, I just want to touch up on what Dr. Fanafi mentioned. I 100% agree. Renewable energy is the future. And in order for us to ensure that, there has to be training policies and upskilling in place within universities. You know, EPC, to my knowledge, there are only about 2 renewable engineers that look after and maintain the entire renewable side of Samoa, and that is not enough. especially if we are only planning to scale even more. And so if, you know, when we talk about renewable energy, there also has to be sustainability. So a lot of, you know, unfortunately, government's really pushing 2025, 100% renewable, but we're not really seeing any sustainability policies within that. There's no 2025 renewable energy, but you know, you didn't tell university students to go study renewable engineering. You told them to go study civil engineering. And now you have students who didn't know that renewable energy was the future in Samoa, going to study completely different degrees because the career opportunities that, you know, we were rolling out are not up to date. So it's not just updating what needs to be and the job opportunities that need to happen or that people need to pursue as career paths in order for Samoa to have a sustainable future and also transition into renewable energy, but also have upskilling opportunities within TVET for renewable energy. When we talk about decent jobs, there are so many within the renewable energy, within energy that doesn't necessarily need high level learning in terms of like studying 4 years to be a renewable engineer. There's just installing solar panels. That's a job entirely that is there are not many trainings for. So, you know, when you look at what needs to happen and what jobs need to be in place in order for renewable energy transition within Samoa to take place, it really is upskilling workers who may have wanted to be electricians to just specialize particularly in green energy. And having these jobs available within universities as a hub for learning, that's a great way to create decent jobs and create opportunities for, you know, people who like are kamuka or really like, you know, tradies to learn more and actually have jobs, especially if Samoa is going to put a budget aside for green energy. So, you know, not just put green energy, but I truly believe that if a government is going to transition into green energy, it should also provide free upskilling to workers to learn more how to create that job. If you want to create decent jobs, you should also provide a way for them to learn how to do well in that specific job without them having to pay more to learn something. Because, you know, sustainable transition is also keeping in mind the people of Samoa as they transition. So yes, renewable energy is definitely the future, but it's keeping in mind how to transition sustainably and, you know, slowly so that everybody is kept in mind and nobody's left behind once we move into this green energy transition. That's just what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Okalani. Nganu Malimana, an opportunity for you to contribute to this thread of the conversation. Thank you. Nganu Malimana, you might need to unmute yourself. Sorry, we still can't hear you. Nganu Malimana.
Good?
Becky.
Okay. Now, I never thought I would learn so much from somebody that would be younger than me. Yeah, you know, you're never too old to learn. Yeah. But I just wanted to share a story about, you know, we're talking about the Stockholm Convention and how it impacts our society. Okay, 2003, I graduated, came back from Japan, and I was working with a group of scientists. I'm not too sure, maybe you all know, you know, Cedric Schuster, who's now, and Sam Singer. Yeah, I think you all know them. We actually did a survey. I was on the persistent organic pollutants in Samoa. So we actually did a whole you know, big survey, and one of the findings was that even after 50 years, 1970s, when we last used the DDT. I'm not too sure if you all know about DDT. Okalani? Nope. It was used to spray the banana plantations, you know, for mosquitoes and that. But DDT has a long, very lifetime in the soil. So when we actually did the survey, we actually surveyed more, you know, the small pigs, the pigs actually that actually, you know, dig around the soil, and it goes into their systems, and in the system it will build up. And what do you think that will end up in? Us. Yes, it's us. Size 2, you know, it's also size 2 for the Kirisimasi, whatever. Yeah, it ends up in us. We actually compared, you know, the pigsty, you know, that uses cement inside, and a pigsty, like, you know, the pigs run around, and we found that the pigsty that the pigs run around and dig up, they're actually digging up these pollutants from 50 years ago. Okay, second part, we actually went to Vaitoloa. Does anybody know what Vaitoloa was used for? What was it? It was a dumping ground. It was a dumping ground for the open landfill. So everything was dumped there. And what do you think was dumped there? It was all the car batteries, all these things. And what we tested was, we were testing for arsenic, mercury, all these heavy metals. And where do you think it was found? In the kuanges. Remember the kuange on the road when you go past and you buy the kanga kuange? Yeah, the shellfish. It's all in there. It's all in there. So ever since then, 2003, I never bought any kuanges from there. It's loaded with heavy metals. Okay. So how did we find out the heavy metals are in our bodies? Okay. Third study, we went to the hospital. And where would you expect the pollutants to be? In the breast milk, right? So when the mother has just had a baby, feeding her baby, feeding her with breast milk, she's just eaten the first water size 2, and it's in her system. So what I'm saying is, yeah, there was a big problem. That was 2003. So what we need, what I'm trying to do with my class is to go out and to survey these potential problems. These are potential problems from 50 years ago that will affect this generation and the next generation. So we're trying to assess what policies were then 50 years ago, and the practices. How can we yeah, make it right? It's
lovely to get some context and some historical information to our current predicament, and also wonderful to hear about ideas about greener jobs as we move forward. And so I guess this all is leading toward the last part of our conversation, which is around the area of accelerating the implementation of the environmental dimension of sustainable development in our context. And so to Dr. Fanafi, I'd like to ask if you would please share about, and most especially because you've also spoken about the importance of finances, money talks. So if maybe you could share about how universities contribute to transforming governance and legal systems that maintain long-term economic stability and ecological and social well-being for all. Whamua mole.
Thank you for the question. It's an extremely broad question, but I think we have been sharing about extremely broad issues. And so although it sounds a bit repetitive, the response has to be equally broad. And when you are speaking of a university, the degrees are so wide ranging. But at the same time, because the reason that these degrees are wide ranging is because they've got to cater to a very broad society of interest and society that's broad in needs as well. And it also shows that for a society to function appropriately and properly, you need all these various skills, because if we all went down the politician line, there's nobody to do the other things. We'd have so many chiefs, but we also need the Cinderellas that have to run around and do all the different things. And so if we're looking at social structures, we need to have an education system that caters right across the board. And the needs, like Ngalumal Mana mentioned, when they went to the villages to try and carry out their surveys and try and carry out projects, everyone's got different needs and everyone's got different views of how important their role is in the society. And often, what I usually say is that the systems or the policies, the benchmark has to be based on the vulnerables. Usually we base it on the strong, and then we do an add-in for the vulnerables. It's like we build a house and then we add a ramp so that people who are in wheelchairs can access. And we put the ramp in and we go tick. We've dealt with access for the vulnerables who have this particular challenge. But if you actually change your mind and you start by building the system with the vulnerable in mind, then it actually caters for the strong as well. So I think that's a mindset shift that needs to happen. And if that can be infused into every aspect, not only of social policy, public policy, fiscal policy, educational policy and curriculum in the form of curricula, and then in relation to the laws that come out, if you change and you look more for the protection of the vulnerable, then you're able to capture the rest that are a bit more able. Yeah, so I'll start with that. And I know that my colleagues will add.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fanafi. And so maybe if the other panelists could talk about what capacities and technologies we might need then in order for us to have this all-encompassing system that enables everyone, vulnerable up, to be prosperous, and in order for us to all share equally in a planet that is sustainable, from the weakest to the strongest. Whamua mole.
Okay, can I go first from Malbole, Dr. Fanafi and Okalani? I just want to say, yeah. Well, maybe we should recognize, we should understand and recognize our role on Earth. What are we? We are stewards. We are stewards of Earth. We do not own nature. We do not own nature. We are part of nature. And that is the problem that people are, people think that we are not part of nature. They are abusing nature. We are part of nature. Well, I get very upset about this. But humans are part of nature, and without nature, we cannot exist. And that's exactly why we are abusing nature. We are abusing, earth. We are abusing our forests. We are abusing our rivers, our oceans, whatever. It's everything. We are just doing, so much damage that, like I said before, is unsustainable. We cannot, like, Okalani's grandchildren will grow up and they will not have the same nature that we have, the environment that we have. We have to do something about it. And well, in a small country like Samoa, we can only do so much, but we can also relay the message to everybody else that, we are part of nature. We cannot get away from it. Yeah. For the future, for our children and our generations to come, they must understand and appreciate. They must understand and appreciate the fragile nature of our environment. Otherwise, we are gone.
Whakatailawa, I think everyone can feel your passion. Wonderful response. Okalani, something from you, honey. Your turn.
Just going back to the question, what needs to be in place, or what capacities and what technologies are needed to improve human well-being? I definitely see it for a Samoan context, just what needs to be done in order for us to live in harmony with nature. Often at times we're always brought in these discussions and we're asked quite broad questions, just like Dr. Fanaafi mentioned, that don't actually relate or apply to us. For instance, how do we maintain fossil fuel, or how do we work with certain things? And we can't really speak on these discussions because, we contribute less than 0.03 to these the greenhouse gas emissions. So why are you asking us to reduce our fossil fuel intake, or why are you asking us to be more conscious about our carbon footprint when we're in fact the ones at the front lines and we're the ones facing the effects in full? We shouldn't be the ones on top of that reducing our emissions or reducing our way of living just so you could survive. And so when I see at what capacity we should be speaking on, it's really just being more present in conversations just like this, like Stockholm 50. It's really amplifying voices of not just us, but our brothers and sisters around the diaspora who are facing and experiencing the same struggles we are, living at the front lines and going about our day to day. I truly believe in terms of technology, it's just, transitioning us sustainably within the digital side. We're working from home now, just like they mentioned. MSIL is putting in place these policies potentially that, really make sure we're not doing our kamehameha or doing something completely different from working from home. But it's, having those trainings and having those awareness campaigns to teach people, not just youth, but, the public in general, how we're going to transition and how we can smoothly transition as a nation to really just work in harmony. And I think when we talk about harmony with nature, it's very broad. There's so much I can speak on, but I think just being more self-aware. I really relate to what Dr. Fainu said about being very angry with the way our people are treating the environment. And I always say this, we are a part of nature and we need nature, but nature doesn't need us. If all humans were to just fall off the face of this earth, nature would be thriving and living on its own, and maybe even be grateful because of all the damage we've done. So it's really just being self-aware that our relationship with nature is symbiotic. We need it. And in order to look after it, we have to protect it. It's very it's not codependent. It's we are dependent. And so just having people be aware of that is very important in understanding our role as humans and as stewards to our environment and to nature. So that's just my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Okalani. Dr. Fanaki, I'd like to ask if you would probably then share about Indigenous approaches to this symbiosis, the symbiotic relationship that is extremely important in our own pathways forward and looking to accelerate our response to ensuring that the planet is sustainable. Good morning.
That's an interesting angle. But if we look at it just historically and logically, before the industrialization, before modernization, before colonization, there was that equilibrium, so to speak, and that balance between Indigenous cultures, not just of our own, but right across the globe, between us and our specific environment, our reliance on it, and therefore the value that we gave it because of our reliance on it. Then with convenience and with substitutions, because they were quicker. And, we moved from, let's use, for example, our homes, the homes that we live in. So our traditional housing, for example, is definitely built for our environment. The things we use to thatch our houses with were from the environment. The tree of life, our coconut tree, so many things for our homes and our shelters were from it. But it didn't take away the artistry and the beauty. They weren't just functional. They have this beauty and sort of awe that comes with our different our structures. And then that richness is transferred into our language, and then the richness transferred in our skills. But you just have to look around Samoa nowadays. Very hard to find a traditional structure that's still standing and being used. Instead, we've gone for the convenience, and a lot of the things that come with convenience are not kind on nature. So they're not kind on the environment, and they're definitely not kind on the pocket. But ironically, now the traditional ways are a bit more expensive. Even the diet, the traditional diet is more expensive because it's more labor intensive, and we don't know how to fish. And so we rely on a certain small group that do the fishing. And then we have people with oil guzzling vessels that get more fish, and they put the small fisher people out of action. And yeah, I'm kind of like going down the line that Ngalumalemana went down as well. But it's like, if you dial back time, which is something that COVID reset button kind of did, it's showing us more. And we're seeing through Facebook, a lot of people during the lockdown were starting to plant little plots of vegetables and trying to have this sort of sustainable lifestyle and lifestyle blocks starting to come up. But they're not new. They're things that our ancestors used to have. And coming back again to this indigenous, these indigenous structures, I think a revival of the indigenous ways will assist in self-sustainability and self-sufficiency. But we still need the technological advancements, because they will actually also help preserve these. And I've noticed with technology that it takes the physical and the real, and then it puts it into a digital format. So there's still networking, which is what people do normally. People network, and then they reflect it in technologies. Computers network. They have a way so that it's interactive. People are interactive, and then technology takes it and they try to put it in a digital form. So it's still us thinking that we've come up with something new, but no, we're just mimicking what nature has already shown us is the way to go. So I think it is dialing back to the indigenous knowledges. It's understanding that for certain societies and contextualizing the existing structures are the way to go when you're trying to increase buy-in. Because if there's no buy-in, then we can't achieve the whole 2030 agenda, which is you have to build mobilize. You have to mobilize everyone everywhere. And if there's no buy-in, you're not going to mobilize everyone everywhere. And incentivizing, because that's part of human nature, is necessary to mobilize people. So we need to have that incentive there. There was a person that was here, they're no longer here, but they started the press, the Plastic Recycling Solutions Samoa. It's currently, the workshop is housed up at Alafua campus for USP, but it's waiting for sponsorship. And so again, we've got this great idea. And because Samoa is a small country, our plastic is not as much as, let's say, China or America, but we still have to ship it off because our recycling capacities on island haven't been financed to a stage where we can incentivize people to bring in the plastic and then pay people to do the recycling. So for example, they did the face shields. Press came up with these face shields. But you know, right now when we had COVID, it would have been so good if that had already been running so that we could have face shields that were made from the plastic that's found here in Samoa. So that would be cleaning the environment and protecting our frontliners and ourselves. SVAMA is another association that is here, and they're trying to do their bit as well. And then all the different environmental groups. There's a Lanulau Ava up at NUS. There's a 350 Club, which is part of 350 Pacific, that's already been mentioned here at Alafua campus. But it's we need to come together instead of working in silos. And we need to have the financial support, because somehow the voice is amplified with an amplifier. And let's just use finances as that amplifier.
Thank you, Dr. Fanafi. As we head toward wrapping up today's conversation, Okalani, something from you?
Thank you. I'm very excited when it comes to Indigenous practice and Indigenous pathways. It's one of my passions when it comes to climate action. So I just wanted to talk on the role of youth and Indigenous people. Youth are one of the most passionate people when it comes to talking about climate activism, but they are also one of the most disconnected when it comes to nature. And that's the role that Indigenous people play. You know, they were always the first stewards of land. They knew when to forage for food, they knew when to fish and when not to, in order to allow fish and nature to grow and reproduce. And so when we look at climate action in the context of Indigenous people, they should really be at the forefront of these conversations when we talk about nature-based solutions. Indigenous people were the first stewards, and they should always be mentioned because of the practices they have had for generations. And as Samoan people, we can also say that, you know, we should be at these conversations because we have known when to fish, when to forage, what agriculture looks like in order for it to be sustainable, in order for us to look after it. And so having Indigenous people work with youth in this sense would be, youth is the passion, but Indigenous people are the knowledge. And so we're having them work together in order to talk about nature-based solutions is so fundamental if you want to look at sustainable policies in order to combat climate change. And so just wanted to touch up on how Indigenous people are so important when it comes to climate action, because they have such a wealth of knowledge within themselves and within their communities that can truly make a difference if only we listen and if only we put them on these tables and have conversations and have them speak on their perspective and their knowledge that they've passed down, because it is truly valuable when it comes to restoring our planet and fighting for a better environment for our people and for the next generation. That's all. Sorry, I get very excited.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Okalani. Now, a final question to you, all three of you. What type of follow-up activities would you like to see from Stockholm Plus 50? If you could probably share a few each as we head toward wrapping up today's Talanoa of Taiki.
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe I'm the only guy here in the room. Anyway, there is a course run by what we call the Asia Pacific Initiative that you mentioned earlier. It's a course run for semi-professionals, professionals that graduates. That includes 10 universities around the Pacific region. There's 5 in Japan. Tokyo University, Keio University, Osaka University, and 2 others. There's another 2 in Asia. There's India, Indonesia. It's on climate change. I would really like to share this, especially for Ukalani and your group. It starts from September until January, and we discuss. Well, actually, it's actually a course run by these universities as part of their degree courses. If anybody's interested, please join.
Whaftai lavangan manmana, Dr. Fanafi, Whamamole.
Personally, I'd really like to see some of the different suggestions actually take form and actually take off on island. I'm really big on the recycling thing because it seems like something that can actually be done, and it'd be really great to have some incentivizing around that. You know, I've got rooms full of plastic and I'm just piling them up, hoping for when lockdown finishes so that I can go take it either to Swarma or, you know, maybe by then there'll be some sponsorship around the press, because we need to actually do something. I think we have covered the areas over and over and over again, and there's nothing like the decade of action to actually show action. So those would be the activities that I would actually just like to see. Any activity, a lot of activity. Solar energy is something that Samoa has been toying with. They actually haven't really gotten into it in a big way. And I say that because hydro is such a big thing, and it's still a big thing. And coming back to indigenous rights to waters and stuff like that. Now that's something, I too am from Savai, like Ngalmanmana, like Okalani as well. We're all from Savai, and we have some of the most beautiful waters in Sili, Savai, where I'm from. And it's a certified organic place as well. And I'd really like any kind of thought about hydroelectric power stations to be the furthest thing from anybody's mind around those waters. And that's when I will tie myself to every tree that is at the top of the head of those rivers, should anybody want to come near those waters. But we need some action that is real and high profile, that we can see and say, we are actually making our mark on this and we're doing something about it.
From another Savai girl to I hear you. Okalani.
Yeah, no, I
last-
have one thing that I really want to really just come out of the Stockholm 50, and that is better climate financing. One thing that the EU, that all of the donors always mention, is that there's so much climate funding, but what they don't mention is the tedious process that comes with applying for climate financing and actually receiving climate financing. So one thing I want to see coming out of Stockholm 50 is better climate financing in the context of small island nations. You know, I have tried applying for processes like this, or I have been involved in them, and it is so tedious, and there are so many loopholes, and things you have to jump over that it just, at the end of the day, nobody wants to apply for and nobody wants to look for grant money because it's just so difficult to receive. So just seeing better climate financing processes out of this would be really great, especially because climate adaptation is something that is really important within Pacific communities, because that's something that we have to prepare for the future, especially because we are low-lying islands. But yeah, that's something that I would really like to see out of Stockholm. And I hope to see be achieved, just better climate financing. Thank you.
Thank you all so very much for your immense contribution to our Talanoa today. I'd like to again just thank you ever so much for your time availed for this critical conversation. Also, Noe from Nuanua Lealofa, thank you so much for your time, for interpreting the spoken word to our other communities, so that accessibility is very, very high on our in our proceedings today. Thank you to all the participants who have made time to be here today. Lepale, over to you.
Fafitai, Mamalo Fafitai, moderator. It has been a pleasure to listen and observe that very constructive and engaging dialogue from our esteemed speakers. You know, we hear the discussions and we hear the tone, how you are delivering your message, and it's obvious, it's quite close, and it's quite dear for you, Alu, Kalani, and as well as Totole Ava. These matters and these thematic areas that we discussed. So thank you so much for that. Also, thank you for the positive vibe. I know it's been 2 hours, it's quite long. We've taken quite significant time out of your day, but nonetheless, that was very informative and there was a positive vibe in this dialogue. So for Tailava, to our distinguished guest speakers, Fionga Totole Ava, Dr. Fanafi Ayuno Tangaloa, yeah, Fionga Ngamalamana, Fainula too, yeah, and last but not the least, the remarkable Okalani Maran. Thank you for the insights and the reflections, the aspirations from academia and also from the youth perspective. So how do we go forward from a Stockholm Plus 50? And I think the conclusions that wrap up that you just made really should draw attention on what needs to be prioritized after the Stockholm Plus 50. I believe everyone, the participants and attendants in our webinar learned a lot today. So I would just like to finish that the webinar sessions that we had today is available on our UNDP's public page. If there's anyone who wants to go and revisit it and listen to this very interesting and informative dialogue, please go ahead. You are welcome to do so. So thank you to our guest speakers. Thank you to all the attendants, participants. And last but not least, thank you to our marvelous moderator, Dr. Omi. That was a very, very good run session. Fafitai Lava for taking the opportunity to moderate the session. I wish you all the best for the rest of the day.